Here in our Weather Water Cooler series, we introduce you to some of our alums to highlight the interesting work they're doing in the various sectors of the meteorology enterprise. Tonight, we welcome Michael Spagnolo, Penn State Meteorology, class of 2016. He is the FEMA, or Federal Emergency Management Agency, liaison to the National Hurricane Center. Welcome to Weather World, Michael.
Thank you, Dr. Neese, for having me.
You know, Michael, everyone kind of has a general sense for what FEMA does, but give us the bottom line from inside the organization.
So we say that all disasters start and end at the local level. So, the first 911 call that comes in is really where things begin. And disasters are locally, the response and recovery to that disaster is locally executed and typically state managed if there's a state or territorial government. And that means that the federal government is there just to support. We are there as a supplemental feature for the local and state assets to do their response and recovery operations. So that can mean typically dealing with bigger national assets, such as the search and rescue teams that a local government might not always have, and if they do, they may only have one team. For example, in Eastern Kentucky, FEMA was very involved with assisting in getting these national teams into Eastern Kentucky to do that search and rescue. But of course, also dealing with the recovery aspect and long-term post-disaster housing on a large scale in a situation where you have a wildfire that's burned thousands of homes, or a situation like a major hurricane that we've seen in Louisiana the last few events. So the FEMA is really there as a support role for those local and federal governments to get them those supplies that they need.
You've only been in your current position a few months. What have you done since leaving Penn State that prepared you for this new role?
So before I was working for FEMA at the federal level, I was working for the state of Florida's Division of Emergency Management as their deputy state meteorologist. So I was there for about 5 years, went there after graduation. And much like the rest of the United States, there was a lot of disasters have happened over the last few years. So there's 4 major hurricanes that I was there for, or Irma and Michael were 2 of the major landfalling hurricanes in Florida, but we also had Dorian and Sally bring impacts. Of course, we had a few wildfire seasons that were significant, and then, of course, COVID. And COVID kind of got me as an opportunity to work outside of weather because it wasn't a weather-related disaster, but we needed operational support. So I really got to get my feet wet in the other more traditional aspects of emergency management. And I've also been a firefighter in Tallahassee, firefighter EMT, became an EMT at Penn State, and kind of kept my feet wet in the first response world as well, and have kind of combined both of those now to get to the federal level in the Emergency Management Agency.
So yeah, let's go there. Tell us about this new role you have as liaison between FEMA and the National Hurricane Center.
So I'm one of 2 liaison officers that FEMA has that is housed at the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida. So we work as Homeland Security FEMA employees under the NHC umbrella. So we work alongside with the National Weather Service partners. And we're here to be the emergency managers in the room. We're not the forecasters. We're not hurricane specialists working on the ops floor, issuing a forecast advisory for the hurricane. We're there to be that line of communication between the emergency management world to kind of oversee that command and collaboration between both the decision makers that are out at the state level, at the local level, at the federal level, all aspects of emergency management, making those decisions about evacuations, sheltering, et cetera. So,
this is your first hurricane season in this role. What have you done to get ready for, and it's been a slow season so far, but this inevitable onslaught of activity that, if it doesn't happen this year, it will certainly happen in future years?
Yeah, I think I speak for everybody when the unexpected slow start this year is much appreciated. Everyone has needed a break from the tropical activity we've happened. And my experience for the last few years in Florida, this isn't my first hurricane season working in this sort of field, but it has definitely been, I was a little nervous moving to Miami in July, trying to get the move completed before hurricane season started. So thankfully it's been slow to allow me to get settled in down here. But making sure that, my family and my home is prepared for a hurricane so that if something threatens us locally, which is usually one of the most difficult parts of the job, is when you have to worry about a situation hitting your hometown, making sure your family and home is prepared. So making sure that my kit at home and my home itself is prepared, as everyone should be prepared for hurricane season, definitely helps me get ready for actually doing my operational job should there be a threat.
So what did you do while at Penn State? You've kind of alluded to this, but what did you do at Penn State that prepared you for this career path?
So I took an emergency medical technician course to become an EMT at the university. They offer that as an elective, and took that kind of on the off chance after meeting a few friends that were sort of involved in that, and it kind of got my feet wet into first response and into the Penn State emergency management community as a whole. And after doing that for a few years, being able to sit in Penn State COC at the at Beaver Stadium and work a few events in there, maybe not as a meteorologist, but just as a general planning support personnel, was able to kind of get a few emergency management certifications and FEMA training courses on my resume. And that really helped get me into the emergency management world, because a lot of emergency managers really don't have formal emergency management training. Emergency managers are typically a collection of experts in different areas and different fields. And then we just kind of share this common emergency management structure knowledge that brings us all together in the operations center to work on our problem solving.
So, Michael, we only have about a minute left. What are some things you like to do when you're not working? And thinking back, what's a favorite memory of being here at Penn State?
Hiking and camping are a passion of mine. I spend a lot of time each year out on the Florida Trail that runs from the Everglades out to Pensacola. So I do spend a lot of time doing that. And of course, thinking back to Penn State, all sorts of memories, lots of good ones. But I think my first big football game, which would have been the 4 overtime Penn State versus Michigan win in 2013, that would, just because that was my first big football game experience and was an unexpected win, is definitely something that will forever stand out.
It's funny you should mention that. I remember exactly where I was for the end of that game. Michael Spagnolo, he is the Federal Emergency Management Agency liaison to the National Hurricane Center. Thanks for joining us, Michael.
Thank you.
And we will be back in a moment with more.